Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to do this presentation today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gitte Ottosen. I've been working with testing for 29 years. I counted a couple of days ago, and to my shock, I realized that May 1st next year, I will have a 30 years anniversary. That's a lot. But I've been working with both as a test engineer and as a test manager, working with process improvement and also a lot with agile implementations and agile transitions. And I see, and that's one of the reasons why I've sort of realized that we can add so much more value than strictly focusing on the profession as a profession, but also use some of the tools that we have to add even more value in an agile context. So whenever I do a presentation, I always start here, because I think when I look at many of the agile implementations that I see around the world, a lot of organizations are still struggling. And there's many reasons for struggling with agile, but one of the reasons I have seen is that these 4 lines of text are being, should we say politely, misinterpreted. Because if you notice, there's some words in red here, and it's the words over. What I sometimes see is that when people start working on an agile transformation, they sort of read that as instead of. So they say individuals and interactions instead of processes and tools, working software instead of comprehensive documentation. But the thing is, what it says is that while there's value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So it actually doesn't say that we should stop documentation. We should just stop doing comprehensive documentation. Think about it this way. Whenever you're going to do some kind of documentation, think about this. Does this add value for anyone? Including yourself, by the way. If it adds value for someone and someone really needs it, then it's all good. We tend to go like a pendulum. First, in traditional sequential development in waterfall, we document a lot. And then the pendulum turns to the other side, and now we don't document. So we need to find a way to keep that pendulum giving a little less movement and being a little bit more in the middle, because we need some kind of documentation. We need some kind of information to keep the wishes and the needs of our business visual to us all, transparent to us all, and shared with us all in the team. It's not enough that we have a product owner and we can talk to him or her on a regular basis. Sometimes we do need more. I mean, if you look at these 12 principles, I don't expect you to start reading them. There's 2 I would like to point your attention to. And one is that our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And even though this is the very first principle of Agile, what we often tend to do is we start focusing more on what and on how, rather than understanding the why. Understanding why do the customer want this feature? Why do the customer want this user story? Understand the business context, rather than jumping into the implementation mode as once. So that's one of the challenges. One of the things I get out of this first principle is, let's stop for a second and understand the why. Let's stop for a second and understand the business context that our solution is going to work with. Understand the needs of our business. And the other one is business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Oh, that would be nice. It would be really great if I, on a regular basis, daily, had the opportunity to work together with people from the business, with the people who's going to use the solution that I'm responsible for testing. But very often we see that that's not really the case, right? So we got to figure out a way to not write a lot of comprehensive documentation, not using a lot of process and tools, but just enough to get the information needed to cover that why, to cover that need of our business when we implement the software. So what do I see as the challenges? There's many, but a couple of them could be, we talk about this cross-functional team. So as I read the cross-functional team, that's a group of people who as a collective has all the competences needed to analyze, design, implement, test, integrate, and deliver software of high value to our business. So the traditional role where we have only one profession, I'm a tester and that's the only thing I can do, or I am supposed to do, needs to move a bit because I need to support my team in a broader sense. So I have my deep competences in testing, but could I add value in a broader sense? That is what I want to explore in this presentation. A little bit, a small detail, by the way, is that we talked a lot in the beginning about the T-shaped function, T-shaped profile. Someone who has a deep special knowledge, and then a broader set of competences that could support the team. For example, I'm a Scrum Master as well. I'm actually also relatively good at supporting the elicitation of requirements, so I can support on a broader scale than focusing on my testing tasks. But lately, first they started talking about the pie shapes, and pie as in that letter, not as in a cake. That would be fun, or that we were all the round shape. But this meaning that we now have two specialities, two deep competences, and then a broader. On a recent conference, I even heard the term comb shaped. And I was thinking, a comb? I don't hope it's that one. That's the one that people with thin, fine hair as I have to use, because there's a lot of teeth on that comb, meaning a lot of different competences. But look at the length of those teeth on that comb. They're not very long. The knowledge is not very deep. It becomes more shallow. So at least if we need to be comb shaped, let's take this one. Fewer teeth and they are longer. So what am I trying to say with this is that, yes, we need to be cross-functional, but everybody don't need to know everything and be able to do everything. I have never coded a line of code in my entire life. As my introduction said, my background is that I'm a corporal from the Air Force. I've never been trained in software development. But during those 30 years in IT development, I have gained a lot of other competences that I can add value with. And other people have deep knowledge about software development, and then broader knowledge on testing, on business analysis, on Scrum mastering, whatever. So as a collective, let's make a team that have all the necessary competences, but also realizing that it is necessary that the teeth on our comb remains long. This one is not the solution, right? That is for back in the multidisciplinary teams or in the waterfall. That will not add sufficient value. There we cannot support our team sufficiently. Another thing is that we have very limited requirements. I mean, we talk about user stories and acceptance criteria, and I don't want to make a hands up vote or anything right now, but I think a lot of teams are challenged with the user stories and acceptance criteria. I very often see user stories just as a one-liner, or maybe a few lines of text, very often moving towards the technical implementation of what they're building, rather than focusing on what's needed. So the requirements are not of a very good quality very often. And on the other hand, the documentation that we get in general tends to be more limited than back in the old days. And for some of it, it's all good. We don't need all that documentation. But to some extent, it has become too limited. How can we do structured testing? How can we identify what's needed if we don't have any other documentation than the 3 lines of text in a user story, if we are lucky? So we need to balance. We need to balance that level of documentation so that we do the level of documentation that's needed. And then the last one, as the other principle I mentioned said, we want our business close. But for many of us, that is a challenge. We don't have the business close. We might have a PO, but sometimes that PO is not only PO for our team. She might be PO for several teams, and it's not available on a daily basis. It's not someone that we can reach out to whenever we need for sparring, for clarification of acceptance criteria, for getting more knowledge. And the other business people, they're not sitting right over there on the other side of the table. They're in another building, they're in another city, and they might even be in another country. So it is a challenge that we want our customers and our users close. And that is the foundation for doing less documentation, is that we sit together and communicate via individuals and interactions. But we don't sit close. We don't sit together. So what can we do about it? Can we just say that we'll do whatever testing is necessary because that's what our profession is? Or could we maybe somehow add more value? Could we maybe help bridging that gap between business and IT? I think we have something very valuable in our skill sets as professional testers that can help adding more stones to this bridge so that we can meet somewhere in the middle. Because, I mean, traditionally in Agile, we'll be here. We'll be part of the sprint planning. We'll be part of the poker planning. We'll commit to the sprint. We'll sit together with a team. We'll test as an integrated part of the sprint. It's all good. But couldn't there be a solution where we were here as well? Where we could use some of the competences and skills that we have to make a better foundation for the user stories before we start building. And this is all in line with the principles of shifting left and building quality and all the other buzzwords that's been very much in focus over the last many years. But we still see that we don't necessarily get involved that much upfront. We are now in the sprint planning, we are now in the sprint refinement maybe, but what if we could be involved even earlier? Could we maybe do something to visualize to our team and share the knowledge with our team about what is it the customer, the user really wants, without documenting hundreds and hundreds of pages, but by visualization and by using one of the skill sets any professional tester has, our toolbox of test techniques. I have had many arguments about these over the years. So, oh no, we are Agile. We do exploratory testing. We don't need that. But the thing is, you use test design techniques in exploratory testing as well. I use equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis whenever I explore a dialogue, trying to figure out what the validation rules are in the individual fields. I use the test techniques to do the initial analysis before I start exploring. So these tools, they're not old and gray. They should not be put into an archive. They should be on the front seat of the car. That should be something that you take at any point in time whenever you need to understand something related to requirements. And not for you to be able to test only, but just as much as a part of eliciting the requirements, understanding the needs of our customers. They can do so much and be so efficient and effective as a way of communication and requirement elicitation. So stop thinking about them as test design techniques only. Maybe think about them as modeling tools. The funny thing is, some of these are actually also a part of the business analyst toolbox. For example, decision tables, but also process diagrams and stuff we use for path testing. So there is an overlap there between the roles. Let's improve on that overlap. Let's help our team in understanding. And let's dive in a couple of examples. I think I can maybe make it a bit more visible with a couple of examples. Whenever I have a spelling error. Sorry about those. The words down there, ignore them. Whenever you discuss with the business about a new dialogue, start with understanding. So you say you want that customer field. Let's have a talk about what should that be able to do. So there's something about age in here. What are the age groups? How are they done? So what's the overlap? Very often I see that things like that is written with a lot of words. And sometimes when we write with a lot of words, we forget whether it's larger than or it's larger than and equal. I mean, this is basic stuff, I know. But we still find bugs here, don't we? We still find bugs in the testing because we misunderstood the validation rules that were set in the beginning. So let's use, let's use equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis and data combinations as a part of understanding what are the validation rules you want. And let's visualize them. Have a chat at a whiteboard with someone from the business, with the PO, to get the understanding upfront, rather than us using it later on for identifying what we need to test. It's much easier to fix an acceptance criteria in a user story than to fix a bug. Another one, excuse me again, I have a slight cold. Another one is, this is my favorite test design technique in the entire world, because most of the stuff that we are developing is supporting a business flow, a business process, some kind of workflow. So the test design techniques from TMAP called process cycle test is amazing. But before you start thinking about a design technique, let's just draw the flow. Again, get up, find some post-its. So what are the actions that's happening? What are the activities in this workflow, in this business process? Whenever they say something that's extremely important, put a post-it up, note it down. Whenever there's something they're not entirely sure about, post it up with a question mark. Here's something we need to clarify. Visualize the decision points. Oh, what about that decision point? Where does that go? Oh, well, I think that's a manual process now. Maybe we should consider in this feature to actually automate that. This is one of the things that have added by far the most value in many of the sessions I've done over the years, because what it does is it creates between the business person and me and whoever's participating a clear understanding of the business process that we are supporting. And with that also, what we need to support in our code, right? So we need to be sure that we handle those decision points. We need to be sure that we understand the different activities that they should be able to do in there. I don't know if you've tried it, but I have tried it on several occasions that the requirements, the formal requirements, they were fulfilled. But when the user looked at the system, they say, yeah, but it doesn't match the way I work. It doesn't match our business flow. So it's essential. It's an essential part of the why that we understand how their business flow works. And then there's a test design technique afterwards, where you're depending on the risk, you can identify the navigation in and out through the decision points, and you can identify what are the test cases we need to do in order to get a sufficient coverage. But that's the next step. That's something we can do later. By the way, also an interesting discussion with our business, because they will tell you, these are the flows that we need to see in our UAT. Many of us still have a UAT. Even though we try to work as agile as possible, we will still have a formal handover to someone. This one is the foundation for that. There is a lot of dialogue to get here. Another thing, business rules. Anyone have a system without business rules? I don't think so. Most of us have, at least, I hope. And the thing is, again, they often come in writing, in a lot of writing. I tried once that they wrote several pages to explain the combinations of input and actions for this business rule, and no one understood a thing. Then I grabbed a decision table. I sat down with the documentation. I tried to identify what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and found out that in the specification they'd made, there were several things that didn't really make sense. Now I have this. I can sit down with someone from business and discuss, so how do you expect it to work? If the car is a normal one, it's small, and the ticket type is a premium, what should the priority be? What should the location be? What should the discount be? Again, now we have a table rather than a huge document. Now, I did the time I tried it first time with a huge document, that was a bit too late, wasn't it? Because if I had gone in even sooner and had a chat, been a part of that discussion about the requirements, we could just have started with the decision table instead of writing all that. As it turned out, in that example, we found out that the decision table exploded and became very, very bad and very, very big because they've simply made the business rules too complex. So from them, it was is that what it means? Let's go back and have a discussion on whether that's really necessary. So the thing is, these are just a couple of examples. These are the ones that most of us know, and they are easy to learn, they're easy to use. And as I said, there's an overlap between process cycle test and this one, and some of the process work that business analysts do. So let's join forces in creating a more transparent and visual presentation of the requirements. In that way, we support individuals in interactions because we interact with our team, with our end users in order to understand their needs. We collaborate with our customer. Having visual and very transparent requirements based on these different techniques, it's easy to respond to change. It's easy to discuss what would the consequence be of this change. So if you want to change that business rule, let's take a look at the decision table. Oh, if you want to change the process, let's take a look at the process diagram and figure out what is it you need to change. So it's easier for us to respond to change. And even more so, we support working software. We support building what is needed and what adds the most value for our business. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Let's get started. But that's the thing. How do we get started? I mean, one way could be facilitate workshops. If you can, ask your PO or some of the business analysts, could I support the next feature? I have this idea. Can I try it out in a workshop? We did that in one of the Danish regions where they had some challenges with understanding some of the bigger processes, where one of our test engineers joined forces with a couple of POs and a couple of clinical testers, and they identified a number of different processes that they were not entirely clear about how to test. And he facilitated the workshops, drawing those business processes. I have a colleague doing that right now, supporting the business in illustrating their business processes, using that as a foundation for our end-to-end testing. Well, what about reviewing? In my one of my previous assignments, the business analyst, every time we made a new feature, he would write use cases, not user stories, but use cases, classical use cases. And every time he gave me a use case, I would draw it. I would take the process diagram, start drawing the process diagram based on the use case. And by doing that, I reviewed his use case. And when I found holes or misunderstanding, I would go back to him. And after doing that 2 times, The third time, he just came back and he just came to me with an earlier draft and say, let's sit down and do the drawing together. So again, proving it in battle. Visualization is key here. Whenever you are having a new feature, if you start with facilitating a workshop focusing on business rules, whatever you have the drawing, or you have the decision table, or you have done a number of different equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, you've done some data combinations showing the complexity and all the different combinations that are relevant, you can visualize what is being built. Print that process drawing. Let's go up and discuss based on that process drawing. Rather than discussing based on words, let's discuss based on drawings. Maybe you could support your team in start working with acceptance test-driven development or behavior-driven development. In acceptance test-driven development, you write, rather than acceptance criteria, you would write acceptance test scenarios, and they can be supplemented and extended with the output of the test design techniques. The Gherkin scenarios, they will be supplemented in terms of identifying necessary combinations, necessary data based on the test design techniques. So find your own way and figure out, how can I, to the best of my ability, support my team in understanding why our business wants this feature, this user story, and what it is they really need. Not in terms of buttons and colors and dialogues, but in terms of understanding their world, understanding what should we be supporting with the solution that we're building. And you might be sitting now thinking, yeah, that sounds great. You have been lucky, Gitte. You've been in situations where management actually allowed you to do all this. I won't be allowed to do that. I can't just go in and ask my PO, please let me facilitate. Then there's another solution. Become a ninja. And what do I mean with that? And by the way, I like the ninja there. Try to do it. We could have had a picture of Che Guevara instead and doing a guerrilla war. What I mean here is, if you're not allowed to do a facilitation, but you're allowed to join the meeting when they have the dialogue, then sit and draw what you hear. You fly on the wall. Draw what you hear. For if we are talking business processes, for example. And then show them at the end of the meeting, excuse me, I just have a quick question. As I understand the dialogue we had here, is this the business process that you mean? And that was how I heard the dialogue. I'm not pushing anything. I'm just trying to understand. Here's the drawing I made. When they're sitting in a meeting discussing the business rules, draw the beginning of your decision table. At the end of the meeting. So I'm a little bit puzzled. I'm not entirely sure I understood. Is this what I heard? Is this what we're supposed to do? So if you're not able, because of whatever limitations in your organization in terms of culture or whatever, try to do it in baby steps. Find small places. Find that one PO who wants it. That one business analyst who can see the value in that. That was how I got started with the process drawing, together with the guy with the use cases. That was one, because there was no one else there interested in what I was doing in terms of test design. But he was. As soon as he saw it the first time, he saw the value. And then everything changed. So look at, how can I, in baby step, change the way we do the requirement elicitation? How can I help visualizing the need of our business as best possible? Thank you very much.